So we're here today to talk about what is harming, literally destroying America's airports around the country. And we've brought back to the studio today Scott Baker, former Marine Corps officer and successful businessman located there in the hub of the aerospace industry, very close to Edwards Air Force Base and the Naval Air Weapons Station there in China Lake, California. And he's here to continue to tell us more about his story because it involves the racketeering, corruption, and fraud by city officials concerning an airport that Mr. Baker, Scott Baker, has been deeply involved in for many years. Welcome back to the program, Scott.
Glad to be back. Thank you.
Okay, I wanted to open up with talking about the fact you were once the chairman of the Tehachapi Airport Commission. You were also the local Pilots Association president.
Yes, ma'am.
And you've pointed out in past programs that elected city officials have stolen airport revenue. Now, it's my understanding they get $150,000 from the FAA every year, $10,000 from the state of California. So you've got city officials up there stealing revenue from the airport and diverting it to their own pet projects and for gaining their own personal wealth, is my understanding of how this is going. You've also shared how city officials not only enrich themselves personally and further their personal agendas, but they put contaminated sewer water on the airport. We've shared that out in shows past. You started to tell me last week or 2 weeks ago on that show about how there's 85 acres of airport property and how suddenly city officials got the idea they're going to apply for $1 million grant and put a motocross track, rodeo grounds, and an entertainment center on airport land, which is supposed to be, from what I understand, based on the law, for aeronautical use, not non-aeronautical use, but for aeronautical use. So, Scott, tell us today about that motocross track and event center and rodeo grounds and how city officials got $1 million grant.
Well, they basically got $1 million grant by falsifying a state grant application. That's the primary way they did it.
All right.
The city officials for years have not understood or respected the responsibility that comes with maintaining an airport.
Sure.
They've used it for their personal little cash cow or ATMs, chipping from it both state and federal grant monies.
Sounds like it.
Money allocated to improve, develop, and maintain that airport for current and future operations, including possible national security implications.
Right.
Okay. After stripping the grant money from it, the city officials then turned around and pointed their collective fingers at users, taxpayers, pilots, hangar owners, business owners, aircraft owners, accusing them of not paying their fair share of its maintenance. And yet, we know that is just flat out false. We know that.
So city officials basically, in order to enrich themselves, have made several attempts to strip the airport of valuable land in exchange for placing a debt. This is what I understand. They placed a debt in the airport fund books, and they've put all the money and kept all the money in the general fund for them to use how they have seen fit. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. That's basically it. And the way that they set their books up, they are depreciating state and federal grants, and that causes a debt against the airport funds while not giving it credit for the actual grants that they receive.
And that's illegal also.
That's illegal.
It's illegal to depreciate federal and state grants.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
On the airport.
So tell us then, you wanted to share more about these multiple designs on the airport. Tell us more about that.
The latest scheme they cooked up, includes a motocross track, event center, and rodeo ground. I could see money as I was going through all the paperwork in the books. I could see money moving from the sewer fund to the airport fund.
Okay.
At the same time, they're setting up a motocross fund, and money's being dumped into there as matching funds to $1 million state off-highway vehicle grant that they had applied for and been approved for a motocross track on airport grounds.
Okay. So, question. Again, as we just pointed out, according to the grant, you said they falsified the grant.
Yeah.
And I understand that the grant was for a motocross track. So the state of California, as you've pointed out, had absolutely no idea that this was going to be on airport land that was not available to them to use on airport land. Is that correct?
Yeah, they didn't know that.
They didn't know that. And another agency that you want to tell us about is Corva, because Corva didn't know about it either. Tell us about Corva.
Well, to begin with, let's start with the grant to the state of California. Okay. In the application on there, they told the state of California that it was going to be on the north side of the airport on city-owned land.
Okay.
That's the way that they placed it out there. Okay, so that was the way that the grant was specified. What the state of California specifies in their grant requirements is that the land must be unencumbered and available, and the city must have access to it, which was not the case because the FAA had not approved it.
Right.
Additionally, when we talk about Corva is the California Off-Road Vehicle Association in California, and what they do is they kind of keep an eye as a watchdog on that green sticker program, which is the program that licenses off-road vehicles for operation on public lands.
So people like you and I, if we were interested in that sort of thing, we could go do our...
Anywhere around East Mojave, the desert, East Mojave Desert, whatever you take
it's
off-road.
A license, right.
If you have a vehicle that isn't licensed for the street, you could pay the sticker fee and then you would be able to go on. So that money then that goes into that licensing program goes for safety program for people off-road.
Okay.
It also goes for improving off-road areas for off-roaders to go to. Okay, so the off-road people watch where their tax money goes, and they want to see that come back to their
program,
fun time,
right.
their program.
Mm-hmm.
And so Corva's watching it. So I get a call from the grant representative of Corva for Southern California, and we're emailing back and forth, and he wants to know why the city of Tehaspe's got close to $1 million grant for a motocross track in a community that's so small, where that money could be used elsewhere to improve Corva projects.
And did he know it was on airport land?
He didn't know it was on. I don't know if he knew it was on airport land or not, but we talked about it, and I told him. I said, well, one, they're trying to put it on an airport, and I said the FAA was not aware that they're trying to put it on the airport.
Okay.
They are aware of it now, and I said it's likely not going to go through because they can't meet the requirements of the FAA, but they've got a lot of things in place, and they've been approved for the grant.
Right, because they falsified the grant application.
And I told him, I said, if it were me running Corva, I said, I think I'd be talking to the state of California because they need to be watching this to make sure that their grants are going to the right place. And I said, I'd be certainly irritated with the city of Tehachapi because as I'm digging into this grant now, I'm finding out that money really isn't for a motocross track. It's being slated for an event center and rodeo ground improvement.
Okay.
And these are the documents in the papers that show that. So this is part of the grant here, which shows $972,000 that the state, $972,500 that the state's going to put in as the grant, plus the $610,000 matching funds from the city. And who knows where that matching funds came out of. But that's the matching funds. So you're talking about $1.58, almost $1.6 million in matching in funds to build a motocross track on an airport that hasn't been approved by the FAA.
Okay. Well, it's just so incredible. Oh, so the state of California approves this $1 million grant for an off-road vehicle motocross track. Then you've got the rodeo grounds. Let's not forget the rodeo grounds and the entertainment center. And all of this is just illegal. And tell us more about the illegality. You've said that they falsified the grant application, but talk to us about how the grant application specified how the track was supposed to be, a mile from any residence, and didn't you say it was like 1,200 feet actually?
There are requirements under the grant application, and there's all kinds of things that they've got to answer.
Okay.
And going through the grant application, I easily picked out right off the bat. One, you're telling the state of California that you do own the land, which the city does own, that you have unrestricted access to that land to build that project for the next 25 years, which is clearly a falsification.
How could anyone say that they have, for a motocross track, a rodeo, and event center, unrestricted access to an airport for 25 years? God only knows what possible national emergency might arise, and they would need the airport.
That airport clearly, the FAA clearly limits the amount of non-aeronautical use on an airport for a maximum of 5 years. That's a 3-year allowance plus a 2-year extension, and that's maximum.
Okay.
And so clearly that wasn't the case, and it's still an airport run by the city, and the FAA still has control of what gets built on that airport. So clearly they didn't have They didn't own the land independently from the FAA.
Well, plus that you've made it clear that they have to submit a request to the
They have
FAA.
to submit a request. In addition to that, one of the things in the application was, is the motocross track that you're intending to put in, is it close to residential or anything like that? And the answer was no, it's more than a mile. Well, it's not more than a mile.
Right.
Okay, and I think the mile was the limit that they had to meet. We took a look at it. The nearest resident was just at 1,200 feet from that motocross
That's
track.
incredible.
So they're not supposed to do that. The other things that they sign off on and certify to is that they're in compliance with all federal and state and local
They
laws.
have to sign
They
that.
have
That
to
they're
sign
in
that off.
compliance.
Yeah, they're compliant.
That's
And
incredible.
they're not compliant.
And you've got a copy of the grant, right?
Yes, ma'am. I have
to
a copy
back
of
up
the
all
grant.
this, and this is why we have here the FAA reports, and there's
Yes.
binders upon binders of information that you've gotten through FOIA requests and through other sources.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that
This
correct?
is all of the evidential and exhibits that I've pulled over the years.
So we're talking about more racketeering charges are in order, and again, there's been no accountability to these city officials who've lied to the state of California and to the federal government through the FAA. So you've got a copy of the grant. Why does the FAA want, I mean, just so our viewers know, why does the FAA want to have city officials submit a request to use airport land? Tell us a little bit, help the audience understand, why does the FAA expect you to send a request?
The FAA, they needs to know for compatibility reasons, okay? You can't have people running around out there doing whatever they want to do in an airport when you got aviation aircraft in the air
Landing.
with people, pilots flying it, and
Right.
people in the aircraft. Not to, the FAA needs to know what's going on that airport, because those things can lead to the death of pilots, they can lead to the death of passengers. Even, it's not just on the airport, it's in and around the immediate vicinity of the airport. The
Sure.
FAA needs to know what kind of construction is going on. If you turn around and you put a movie theater at the end of a runway and then you crash an airplane into it, you're going to kill lots of people or hurt lots of people down there.
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking out loud. Think about a rodeo and you think about a motocross track, and I'm thinking lots of dust and a lack of visibility on the part of pilots.
Yeah, there's a lot of things
A
going
real
on.
safety liability issue.
Visibility, liability. I've owned
Traffic.
I've owned cattle. I've owned a couple bulls. Those bulls,
Stir up a little dirt.
they'll go right through a fence.
Okay.
And the last thing I need to see is a bull sitting over there on the runway looking at an airplane.
That's
Okay?
incredible.
It's a possibility.
Absolutely.
We do all we can. There's enough cowboys there. Maybe they stop that from happening, but I'm not willing to take the chance.
Okay.
Additionally, in the
Okay.
compatibility issue on there that you need to be aware of,
Okay.
the federal government, they spend a lot of taxpayer money
Right.
to ensure that airport remains part of the national transportation system. Okay, and they're not going to want to see those tax dollars, parceled out for non-aeronautical uses. They
Right.
want to see that property retained as an airport. Airport property typically doesn't get greater and greater and greater over time as populations move in. It shrinks those airports, and you want to maintain that airport as viable as you can as that community grows.
Right.
It needs that room.
Right. Exactly.
Okay? And you don't parcel it off for other things.
Well, I'm constantly hearing about airports in other parts of the country that maybe aren't being run by Democrats that are growing their airport, and I think that's important. I think population centers are growing, and you need to
Yes.
have a growing, viable, and safe airport to use. And I'm thinking, you mentioned the thing about taxpayers, and I know this isn't part of what we've written down, but I just wanted to add again. Talking about diversion of funds, and taxpayers, I just want to mention again $150,000. Those grants that come from the FAA, from the state of California, that's our tax. That's our tax
money
pay.
to help
Right.
them improve that airport.
Right. Question. So when the motocross and rodeo issue came up, didn't the Tehachapi Airport Hangar Owners Association, those people that own a hangar out over there on the Tehachapi Airport, and the pilots, I was looking at a newspaper article that, they were sharing how deeply concerned they were about the safety issue, what we were just talking about. Was that in fact published in the local newspaper there? Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
It was put out. It was put out as in the local newspaper out there as part of the discussion that the city had had a little bit with the pilots on that situation.
But it
And of
seems like
course,
they were ignored.
they were ignored. They were concerned, they were concerned about the dust, and the answer was, well, if there's too much dust, we'll just shut it down. And I heard that. Well, you just took $1 million grant that you told the state of California you're going to operate it for 25 years for. Okay.
Unrestricted is what from unrestricted for 25 years. Okay.
It's a safety issue, and using the airport as an airport is important to the pilots that make investments on that airport as well.
Okay. All right. Question. So the city got approved for this $1 million grant for the use of airport property for non-aeronautical use. The city's argument is, and this is, I want to challenge you with this today. Okay. The city officials said, we're going to do all this because the airport property is underutilized and we want to bring more revenue into the city. Why is that a bad argument?
Well, it's underutilized because they wanted it underutilized, and it's a bad argument because for the last 23 years, I've been trying to push them to develop the north side of that airport for aviation use. They're getting $150,000 a year minimum from the FAA for AIP money, Airport Improvement Program. They get $10,000 a year from California Aeronautical, which is Caltrans Aeronautical. They get money now. They were getting up to $30,000 a year finally from the sewer fund, which they've cut now back to $12,700 a year. That's money that could be invested in the north side development. Instead, they want to come in there and they want to put in a motocross track and a rodeo ground. That property is zoned light industrial, which would, if they developed it out, would cater to industrial machine shops, that would cater to the aviation industry. It would cater to aircraft restoration. It would cater to FBOs that would do annuals and other maintenance on the local aircraft in the area.
Right.
Repairs on the aircraft. There's a whole host of things it could do, plus bring in additional high-paying jobs into the area that are manufacturing and industrial jobs.
So it sounds like tremendous amounts of revenue could be brought in if they just continue to work on developing and expanding the airport and the uses of the airport. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Under Title 49 of the United States Code, does it not state that any and all changes to airport land must be in consultation with airport users, such as the pilots and the hangar owners? Were they ever actually consulted by city officials?
The requirement is yes, they must do that. The city used to have an airport commission. I chaired the airport commission for several years on it. I got off the commission in 2001. In 2013, the city's new council member on there decided that they needed to review whether we even needed an airport commission. They convened a small ad hoc committee of themselves, city managers, airport manager, and a council member. And within 1 month, they decided, well, we're going to abolish the airport commission.
Why do you think they decided to abolish the airport commission?
Because they were planning to put a motocross, an event center, and rodeo ground improvement over there, and they didn't need the pushback from the pilots.
Okay.
That's why they did it.
All right. So, Scott, when I was looking at the FAA, some of the reports in here, I read something about the FAA assurances. And city officials, from what I understand, are supposed to give preference to veterans. Now, this is an FAA guideline. In other words, this has to be fulfilled. It's part of the federal code. So tell us about that. I mean, I'm not aware that any veteran has ever received preference. And from what I understand, you have a lot of military pilots, former military pilots, that use the airport. NASA pilots. I mean, tell us about that.
It's part of a mandate within the grant assurances that you give preference to veterans along that side of it. And the short answer is they don't know who the veterans are in that airport, and I don't think that they care. That nobody knows who owns what hangar. Nobody takes preference on it. Nobody's ever discussed it. That's what airport commissions help make decisions for, or help make recommendations to the city for, is to protect those things. You have people there that are former NASA pilots. They're former astronauts in the local area. We have people up there still like Bill Dana. We have people like Bob Myers, who came from NASA, and his former wife, his late wife, who was at NASA. Both flew in the SR-71 program. We have F-35 pilots. We have that worked in the F-35 program. We have F-22 pilots. We have the former chairman of the Airport Commission, which is a U-2 pilot. Okay?
So you've got
multitude of them.
Okay, so many veterans, and I hear about veterans committing suicide, and I hear about veterans needing jobs, and it really disturbs me as a taxpayer and a citizen that city officials in Tehachapi would just completely ignore the veteran community that's right there in your mountain community. Let's So I have another question. As we kind of begin to wrap things up, we mentioned in the opening that the national security component of every airport in the United States of America has to be a priority. That is, again, part of the FAA guidelines for your airport receiving $150,000 every year.
Yeah.
So I don't see that national security component being respected or adhered to. Based on what I read, the airport is supposed to be available for use by government aircraft at all times. That's what I read, including air traffic control and all air navigation activities. So am I right about this? The city officials are basically ignoring the national security component of that airport.
As far as building out and development for the local community to protect it, you have, of course, all these wildfires that we're seeing up and down the state of California right now.
Right.
Okay, the airport does support firefighters on there, helicopters on there for firefighting
First
in that
responders.
area. As mentioned, earlier, these things are all important on there. As a mountain community, that airport serves as a staging and launching point for wildfire suppression, earthquakes. We had a major mudslide a few years ago. People couldn't get down Highway 58 or down the back road, and some of the local pilots were able to fly them onto the other side of that mudslide and get them back to their families.
Wonderful.
Pilots needing to get to an event of an emergency coming out of Tehachapi that need to get to Edwards Air Force Base, need to get to Mojave, need to get over to China Lake, can certainly fly out of there and make it into those regions, and that airport serves as that. Medevac in the local area. If you've got first responders in that area that are trying to take care of your community by trying to suppress wildfires in the community and they get injured, that acts as a medevac facility for them. It also acts as a medevac facility for people on the civilian side with major trauma or major cardiac issues or other problems medically that can get them to a hospital that the Tehachapi Hospital can't handle quickly.
Okay, excellent. So again, this is why it's so important that the FAA guidelines be observed, and strong support for the community that hosts the airport is absolutely vital. Wouldn't you say so, both locally and nationally?
Yes, absolutely. Maintaining a viable aviation presence in a mountain community like Tehachapi is vital for everyone's safety and their well-being.
Okay.
Strong support from manufacturing and maintenance is vital to maintaining emergency air operations over a sustained period of time, such as an example of fighting a wildfire.
Sure.
Strong support from the community that hosts the airport is just as vital. People oftentimes see an airport and they look at the boys and their toys flying around the airport, forgetting that airport serves as a place for first responders, for aviation support for wildfires, for doing medevacs out of there, for military that may have to come in there in the event of a riot. Any of that stuff could be along that area. Police support, police helicopters, any of those things are important.
I know that airports are also used for training purposes as well.
We get C-130s in there doing touch and goes for the U.S. National Guard.
There you go.
For the military.
Yeah, I know there's training, and that's, again, another military component. I want to thank you so much, Scott, for coming in and telling more about your story. Let's take a commercial break.
I want to tell you about a place I love to go, Frugatti's Italian Restaurant. Very few locations here provide seating outside in front of a fabulous water fountain with an atmosphere that is reminiscent to me of eating outdoors in Venice. This is real Italian food by real Italians. And what makes it even more so is owner Ralph Frugaletti, who nearly a quarter century ago brought a wood fire oven from Milan, Italy to make, like his mother, fresh homemade bread and pizzas. Moreover, Frugatti's Restaurant offers you not only the very best in Southern Italian cooking, even importing the finest ingredients for authentic Italian food, including a fitness menu. After all, Ralph has represented the United States and Italy, competing in the Master Championship Games. He knows all the right food for good fitness, so check out the menu. After After today's broadcast, run over to Frugotti's Italian Restaurant and Catering at 600 Coffee Road here in Bakersfield. And after a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday service, stop into Frugotti's for a great lunch. And for dinner, there is live music every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'll see you there, and tell Mr. Ralph Frugaletti that Denice sent you. Salute. Buon appetito.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we're looking for is accountability. Wouldn't you say so, Scott?
Yes, ma'am. I want some accountability on all this stuff.
There needs to be justice on this, and we hope that those of you that are listening will share this broadcast out. Share it to all of your local, state, and federal officials, your congressmen. Corva, let the government know from the local, state, and on all three levels of government what is happening here, because this situation needs to be reversed. And this is happening again to airports across the country. And this kind of graft and corruption by city officials has got to end. And we're just exposing, our corner of the world. But again, this is an example of what's going on nationwide. I also want to let you know that we have reached out to Kirk Schaefer there at the FAA. He's one of the individuals in charge. If you'd like to look up Kirk Schaefer, Schaffer, there at the FAA in Washington, D.C., there's a phone number right there on the FAA website for Kirk Schaefer, Schaffer, if you'd like to call him and talk to him about the situation. We want to encourage you to call the FAA.
He has all this documentation too.
Yes, Scott, you sent all this information, and we're just trying to get the word out so that there can be some, and it's more than accountability, so the wrongs can be righted, and this airport, like other airports that are used for multiple issues throughout the year, are able to fulfill their purposes as intended under federal and state law. Thank you so much for listening, Scott. Thank you so much for coming back on the Denise Gary Show. And we want to also thank you for your service in the United States Marine Corps.
My pleasure.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. We'll be back with you tomorrow.